Welcome to English Avenue, your home for motivational stories, viral biographies, and powerful English learning videos. Before we begin, if you want to watch the full emotional biography of Steve Jobs, the man behind Apple, we've already made it for you. It's an unforgettable story of a dropout, a dreamer, and a fighter who changed the world. You can find the Steve Jobs biography in our channel's playlist. Watch that for his personal journey. But today is different. Today, we tell the story of a company, not just a man. A company that was laughed at, almost destroyed, resurrected, and finally became the most valuable brand in the world. This is the story of Apple Incorporated. Not just Steve Jobs, but also Steve Wozniak, the quiet genius, Tim Cook, the operator who led Apple after Steve, and many more unsung heroes who made Apple what it is. In today's video, we'll walk you through how two young men started a tech company in a small garage with no money, how Apple lost everything, and how it fought back to win the world. How they created the iPod, iPhone, iPad, and changed music, communication, and computing forever. How the brand grew from $0 to $2.8 trillion in market value. And how vision, design, and boldness built a global culture. Not just a company. This isn't just a company story. This is a revolution. This is a business masterclass, a branding lesson, a storytelling strategy, and most importantly, a powerful English practice tool for you. Yes, this video is also made for your English listening and learning. We use simple sentences, emotional storytelling, and real vocabulary that will help you understand and improve your English fluency while you enjoy the story. So, sit back, take notes, and let the journey begin. We now start Part 1 of the Apple story. Part 1. The garage that birthed a giant. In 1976, in Los Altos, California, a 21-year-old dreamer named Steve Jobs convinced his old friend Steve Wozniak to help him build a computer. Steve Jobs was not an engineer. He was a visionary, a salesman, and a man obsessed with simplicity and design. Steve Wozniak, on the other hand, was a genius engineer, shy, quiet, and incredibly talented. They were complete opposites, but together, they would start something the world had never seen before. They didn't have an office, they didn't have money, they didn't even have a company, but they had a garage, the one behind Steve Jobs' parents' house. And they had an idea. Let's build a computer that anyone can use, even if they don't understand technology. Wozniak designed the first Apple computer, the Apple I. It had no screen, no keyboard, no plastic casing. It was just a simple motherboard. But it worked. Jobs, the salesman, went to a local computer store called the Byte Shop. He told the owner, "We'll sell you 50 computers. You pay $500 each. We'll deliver in 30 days. The problem? They had no money, no parts, no factory. But Jobs believed. He borrowed money, sold his Volkswagen van, and convinced suppliers to give parts on credit. Together with Wozniak and a few helpers, they built the Apple I by hand in that small garage. The total sales? Over 200 Apple I units. Not bad for a couple of kids in a garage. Why the name Apple? Jobs chose the name Apple for 3 reasons. 1. It sounded friendly. 2. It appeared before Atari in the phone book. Jobs once worked at Atari. 3. He was on a fruitarian diet at the time. And so, Apple Computer Inc. was officially born on April 1st, 1976. Yes, on April Fool's Day. But this was no joke. This was the beginning of a brand that would change the world. While the Apple I was successful, it was just the beginning. Wozniak began working on the Apple II, A better, more complete version. Color screen. Keyboard. Plastic casing. Easy to use. They showed it at a computer show. Investors were shocked, not just by the tech, but by the beautiful design. Jobs made sure it looked clean, simple, and futuristic, different from the ugly machines other companies were making. In 1977, they launched Apple II. It became the first mass-produced personal computer in the world. In the first year, they sold $770,000 worth of computers. In the second year, it jumped to $7 million. By 1980, Apple was making $117 million a year. Apple was no longer just a garage project. It was a company on fire. On December 12, 1980, Apple went public. It sold shares on the stock market. The result? The company was instantly valued at $1.2 billion. Over 300 Apple employees became millionaires overnight. Steve Jobs, at just 25 years old, became a multi-millionaire. But money didn't make him stop. He wanted more. He wanted to make the greatest computer in the world. And that desire would take Apple into new territory. And into its first major war. At that time, IBM was the king of computing. A big, powerful company, trusted by businesses and governments. Apple was the young rebel. And Steve Jobs. He was ready to go to war. He said, IBM wants it all. Apple is the only hope. This wasn't just about selling computers. It was about fighting for freedom, design, and the future. By 1981, Apple had hundreds of employees, millions in revenue, and was becoming a household name. But success came with new problems. Internal teams were divided. Engineers wanted stability and practicality. Jobs wanted beauty, boldness, and revolution. Steve Jobs was becoming increasingly demanding, aggressive, and difficult to work with. He pushed everyone to the edge. He'd walk up to engineers and say, "This is garbage. You can do better." He believed in perfection or nothing. Some employees admired him, others feared him, many quit. But one thing was clear. Steve Jobs was not ready to slow down. While Apple II was making money, Jobs wanted something more advanced, more beautiful, something visionary. One day he visited Xerox PARC, a secret research lab. There he saw a prototype, a computer with a graphical user interface, GUI, a screen with icons, a mouse, windows. At that moment, Jobs saw the future. He rushed back and told his team, "This is it. This is the future of computing, not text, not command lines, but images." Simplicity. He quickly started building a secret project, the Apple Macintosh. Jobs pulled a small team into a separate building and told them, "You are not just engineers. You are artists. You are revolutionaries." He demanded crazy hours, impossible goals, and perfection. One engineer said, "Working on the Mac team was like going to war, but for something we believed in." The Mac was compact, beautiful, had a mouse and GUI, easy to use, friendly and personal. But it was also expensive to make. Each unit would cost around $2,500 to build and would sell for $2,495, almost $7,000 in today's money. The marketing had to be legendary. To introduce the Macintosh, Jobs partnered with ad agency Chiat Day. They made a commercial, a short film directed by Ridley Scott, the same director of Blade Runner and Gladiator. The ad showed a gray, dystopian world where people obey Big Brother. Then a woman runs in, throws a hammer, and destroys the screen. Tagline: On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984. The ad aired only once, during the 1984 Super Bowl, and it became legendary. People didn't just watch it, they talked about it. News channels played it. It got millions of dollars worth of free attention. Apple wasn't just selling a computer, they were selling a movement. On January 24, 1984, Steve Jobs stood on a stage in a dark suit and launched the Apple Macintosh. He pulled it out of a bag. It spoke. "Hello, I'm Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag." The audience cheered. People cried. It was magical. Apple sold 70,000 units in the first 4 months. But then, the problems began. The Macintosh was slow. It had no hard drive, just a floppy disk. It had little memory. It was expensive. It crashed often, and businesses didn't like it. Meanwhile, IBM was dominating the market. And Microsoft, Jobs' new software partner, was secretly working on Windows. Sales dropped. Retailers started returning units. The board of Apple got nervous. Jobs had once hired a powerful CEO from Pepsi, John Sculley, with the famous line, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" But now, Jobs and Sculley were at war. Jobs wanted big risks, crazy ideas, total control. Sculley wanted discipline, numbers, predictable business. Jobs would scream in meetings. He'd ignore budgets. He'd insult people. Finally, in 1985, the board of directors made a painful decision. They told Sculley, "Steve is out of control. You have to choose. Him or the company." In September 1985, Apple's board removed Steve Jobs from the Macintosh division. And soon after, he resigned from the company he had founded. He was just 30 years old. At a press conference, Jobs was calm, but heartbroken. He later said, "I was out, and it was devastating. I felt I had let everyone down, but I still loved what I did." Steve Jobs, the soul of Apple, was gone. And Apple was now being led by people in suits. After Jobs left, Apple continued building computers, but the magic was missing. They released Macintosh 2, too expensive. Newton, early iPad-like device, a failure. Power Macintosh, underwhelming. Competitors were rising. Microsoft launched Windows 3.1 and then Windows 95. Dell and HP were winning the personal computer market. Apple's market share fell. Their products became confusing, overpriced, and boring. By 1996, Apple was almost bankrupt. The company that once said, "Think different," had become just another tech company. They needed a miracle. And that miracle was the man they had once pushed out. Part 2. The Return of the King. Let's begin by understanding how bad things really were. From 1986 to 1996, Apple made mistake after mistake. They launched too many products. Each product had a different design, software, and accessories. There was no clear vision. Competitors like Microsoft, IBM, Dell, and HP were dominating. Apple's computers were expensive, slow, and incompatible with most software. By 1996, Apple's stock price was under $7 per share. They were losing $1 billion per year. At one point, Apple had only 90 days of cash left. People were writing Apple's obituary. Magazines printed headlines like, "Apple is dead. What went wrong with the world's most loved brand?" Apple was surrounded by companies with more money, better products, and stronger teams. They needed help. Fast. Back to Steve Jobs. After being fired, he didn't give up. He created a new company called Next Inc. in 1985. Next focused on building high-performance workstations for universities and businesses. They were powerful, beautifully designed machines, but also very expensive, around $6,500 per unit, equal to $15,000 today. Sales were weak, but the operating system, Next Step, was way ahead of its time. It was stable, easy to use, extremely well designed. Even though the hardware failed, the software was brilliant. Also during this time, Jobs bought Pixar from George Lucas for $5 million and turned it into a world-changing animation company. More on that later. Now let's come back to Apple in 1996. They were desperate for a better operating system. Their own was outdated, slow, and falling apart. So they looked outside and found Next. In a move no one expected, Apple acquired Next in 1997 for $429 million. And with that, Steve Jobs returned to Apple. After 12 years in exile, when Steve returned to Apple, he didn't celebrate. He was furious with what he saw. He walked into meetings and said, "This is crap. What the hell is this? Why are we making 20 different computers?" At that time, Apple had dozens of models. Performa 6200, Quadra 950, Macintosh LC 580, PowerBook Duo, Newton Message Pad, and more. Jobs was confused. He asked, "Can someone tell me which computer to buy?" No one could answer. He walked to a whiteboard and drew a simple 2x2 grid. Consumer professional. Desktop. Laptop. That's it. He said, "We're cutting everything else. 4 products. That's all. Let's make them the best in the world." This simple moment changed Apple's future. The iMac, beautiful, fun, and blue. Steve wanted to make a computer that people would love, not just use, but feel emotionally connected to. He teamed up with Johnny Ive, a quiet, young British designer working at Apple. Together, they designed the iMac, a computer that looked like nothing else. Transparent, colored like Bondi blue, rounded, futuristic design, easy for beginners, all in one system. No floppy drive, which shocked people at the time. It was bold. It was beautiful. It was Apple reborn. Launched in August 1998, the iMac sold over 800,000 units in just 5 months. It brought in over $1 billion in revenue. Suddenly, Apple wasn't dying anymore. People were lining up to buy an Apple computer for the first time in years. Jobs focused on less but better. He simplified everything, removed unnecessary product lines, closed failing stores, fired executives who didn't align with the vision, focused the entire company on design, user experience, and simplicity. Even the Apple packaging changed. It became clean, white, and minimal. The Apple logo, which was once rainbow-colored, became monochrome, silver or white. It looked more serious, more elegant. Apple wasn't just changing the way it built computers, it was changing the way it told stories. It was becoming an emotional brand, not just a tech company. In 1997, Apple was $1 billion in debt. By 1999, thanks to the iMac and the new leadership, Apple became profitable again. Apple's stock price went from $7 to $99 within 3 years. Its market cap increased from under $3 billion to over $10 billion. New products like the Power Mac G4, iBook, and Cinema displays started gaining attention. But more importantly, people started believing in Apple again. Jobs famously said, "We're not just selling computers. We're selling tools for the mind that can change the world. One of the most surprising moments in Apple's comeback was this. In 1997, Jobs went on stage and announced, "We are partnering with Microsoft." People gasped, some booed. Why? Because Microsoft had stolen Apple's GUI years earlier and created Windows. Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were seen as rivals. But Apple needed help. Microsoft invested $150 million in Apple to help it survive, with an agreement that Apple would support Microsoft Office on Mac. Jobs said, "We have to let go of the idea that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose." This humility and this strategic move bought Apple time. Time to rebuild, time to innovate. By the year 2000, Apple had a profitable business, a powerful new operating system based on Next, strong design language, a passionate user base, and most importantly, a fearless visionary back in control. But Apple wasn't finished. In fact, it hadn't even started the most important part yet. Apple was safe, but Jobs was not here to play it safe. By 2001, Apple had stabilized. The company was back in profit. New computers were selling well. The brand was cool again. But Steve Jobs wasn't interested in playing safe. He had something bigger in mind. He didn't want Apple to be just a computer company. He wanted Apple to become a part of your lifestyle. He once said, "The problem with Microsoft is that they have no taste." Apple is about the intersection of technology and liberal arts. We care about beauty. About Soul Jobs was obsessed with design, music, experience, and simplicity. That's when an idea was born. At the time, the way people listened to music was a mess. CDs were bulky. MP3 players were ugly and hard to use. File sharing was illegal and dangerous. Remember Napster? Jobs saw the future clearly. He told his team, "Let's build a music player. But not just any music player. It has to be simple, elegant, and it must feel like magic." The team began secretly working on the device. It was led by John Rubinstein, hardware; Tony Fadell, system architecture; Johnny Ive, design. And in October 2001, they launched the very first iPod. It was small, size of a deck of cards, white and clean, had a click wheel, 5 gigabytes of storage, and could hold 1,000 songs. Steve stood on stage and said just one sentence. "This amazing little device holds 1,000 songs, and it fits right in your pocket." The world had never seen anything like it. The iPod was not just a product. It was a movement. People didn't just buy the iPod. They felt it. Apple's marketing was minimal, artistic, and cool. Remember the famous silhouette ads? Black figures dancing, white iPods and earphones popping against bright-colored backgrounds. No words, just music and emotion. It wasn't about features anymore. It was about feeling. Apple was no longer selling products. Apple was selling identity. The original iPod only worked with Mac computers. That meant 95% of Windows users couldn't use it. Sales were slow at first. Only around 125,000 units sold in the first few months. Jobs realized they were holding the product back. In 2003, Apple released iTunes for Windows. Now anyone, even if they didn't own a Mac, could buy and sync music using iTunes and own an iPod. Sales exploded. Let's look at the numbers. 2001, iPod launches. 2002, 600,000 units sold. 2003, 2 million units. 2004, 8 million. 2005, over 22 million iPods sold in 1 year. 2006, over 88 million iPods sold to date. That's not all. From 2001 to 2006, Apple's annual revenue grew from $5.4 billion to over $19 billion. Net profit grew from $65 million to $2 billion. Its stock price rose from $7 to $85 per share. Apple wasn't just alive. It was becoming a global force. In 2001, the same year as the iPod launch, Jobs opened the first Apple retail store in Tysons Corner, Virginia. People thought it was crazy. Why would a tech company open expensive physical stores when most brands were moving toward online? But Jobs had a vision. The stores would be clean, minimal, and beautiful. Every detail would be controlled. Employees would be knowledgeable, passionate, and friendly. No pushy sales, just experience. The first store was a success. Then came the second, then the third, then hundreds. By 2006, Apple had over 170 stores worldwide. They were generating more profit per square foot than Tiffany & Company. People didn't come just to buy. They came to experience the brand, to touch the future. While the iPod was leading the way, Apple didn't forget its roots. They launched Mac OS X, a stable, powerful operating system. MacBook Pro, sleek and professional. iMac G5 and Intel-powered Macs, fast, modern. Time Machine, iLife, and other beginner-friendly apps. Apple computers were no longer just for designers and nerds. They were becoming for everyone. Even schools and businesses were slowly adopting Macs again. From 2001 to 2006, Apple transformed itself completely. It became a leader in music, not just tech. It created a new retail experience. It rebuilt its software ecosystem. It attracted millions of new users. And it turned its brand into something people wore proudly. The white earbuds became a symbol. Owning an iPod meant you were different. Jobs once said, "People with passion can change the world, and we're just getting started." He wasn't lying, because what came next would change everything, not just for Apple, but for the entire human race. Part 3. The day the world changed forever. The mobile phone industry was boring. Steve Jobs hated it. In 2005, Apple was flying high. But Steve Jobs was frustrated. He looked around at the mobile phones in the market and saw ugly, clunky, confusing devices. Tiny screens, plastic keyboards, slow internet, bad cameras, complicated interfaces. Even the best phones, or from Nokia, Motorola, and BlackBerry, felt old and frustrating. Jobs said to his team, "These phones are not smart. They're stupid. We can do better. Much better." But Apple didn't know anything about the phone industry. So they partnered with Motorola to create a phone called the Motorola ROKR, which included iTunes support. It was a disaster. Ugly design, slow syncing, could only store 100 songs. Bad user experience, no magic. Jobs was embarrassed. He called it the wrong approach. And then he made a decision that would change the future of Apple and the world. Jobs gathered a small team of Apple's top engineers and designers. He told them, "We are going to build a phone, but not just a phone. We're going to reinvent the entire phone industry." The team was moved to a secret building inside Apple, nicknamed the Purple Dorm. It was completely hidden. Only select people were allowed inside. They worked for months and years, in secret, day and night, with no sleep, no weekends, and extreme pressure. The mission was insane. A touchscreen phone with no physical keyboard. A phone that could play music, browse the internet, send emails, run apps, and make calls, all in one. A phone that was beautiful, intuitive, and powerful, all inside a thin device that fits in your pocket. It was nearly impossible, but they did it. The world didn't know what was coming. On January 9th, 2007, at the Macworld Conference, Steve Jobs stood on stage in his signature black turtleneck and jeans. He looked at the audience and said, "Today we're introducing 3 revolutionary products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communicator. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone." The audience exploded with applause. People were shocked. The moment felt like science fiction had become reality. The first iPhone was not perfect, but it was light years ahead of everything else. It had a full multi-touch glass screen, a powerful Safari browser, real internet, visual voicemail, an iPod built in, Google Maps, beautiful animations, and that famous slide to unlock gesture. No one had seen a phone like this. There were no buttons, no antenna, no menu clutter. Just a clean black screen and a single home button. Steve Jobs said, "Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. This is one of them." The iPhone launched in June 2007. Price? $499 for 4 gigabytes. $599 for 8 gigabytes. Carrier? Exclusive to AT&T in the US, people lined up for days outside Apple stores. There were stampedes, media frenzy, and sold-out stock. In the first weekend, Apple sold over 270,000 units. By the end of 2007, they sold 1.39 million iPhones. Apple's market cap crossed $100 billion for the first time. But Jobs wasn't done. He wanted to build not just a phone, but an ecosystem. In 2008, Apple launched the App Store. It was revolutionary. Developers from around the world could build apps. Apple would review and approve them. Users could download them with one click. It turned the iPhone into more than a phone. Now it was a flashlight, a calculator, a game console, a travel guide, a camera editing studio, a calendar, a social media tool, and anything else a developer could imagine. By giving power to developers, Apple created a new digital economy. Apple took 30% of all app revenue, and the App Store exploded. In the first year, 500 apps available, over 1 billion downloads. Apple earned hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. This changed everything. Apple released a new iPhone every year, improving it each time. iPhone 3G, 2008. Added GPS plus App Store. iPhone 3GS, 2009. Faster, better camera. iPhone 4, 2010. Retina display, FaceTime, new design. iPhone 4S, 2011. Introduced Siri. And it kept going. Each model sold tens of millions of units. Apple's profits skyrocketed. By 2010, iPhone sales crossed 40 million units per year. Revenue from iPhones alone crossed $25 billion per year. Apple was no longer a computer company. It was a consumer electronics superpower. Let's look at Apple's growth between 2006 to 2010. Annual revenue grew from $19 billion to $65 billion. Net profit grew from $2 billion to over $14 billion. Stock price went from $55 to over $300 per share. Market cap exploded from $50 billion to over $300 billion. Apple became the second most valuable company in the world, behind ExxonMobil. iPhone alone accounted for more than 50% of Apple's total revenue by 2010. Jobs had done it. He had taken Apple from a near-dead company to the most powerful force in tech. The world didn't know. Steve was sick again. During this explosion, something dark was happening behind the scenes. Steve Jobs had battled pancreatic cancer in 2003. He had surgery and returned. But the illness had never completely gone away. In 2008 to 2009, Jobs took a leave of absence due to health reasons. Rumors spread. Apple's stock fell every time he appeared too thin in public. But Jobs kept working. He kept pushing. He refused to stop because he knew the next invention was coming, and it would change the world again. Even while battling cancer, Steve Jobs had one more dream. He believed there was a missing device between a smartphone and a laptop. People laughed when he told them. They said, "No one wants a big iPhone. It's just a toy. Tablets already exist, and they failed." But Jobs saw the future differently. He believed, this is not just a big phone, it's a new category. His team worked in complete secrecy. Every detail was considered: weight, battery life, display sharpness, the magical feeling of swiping with one finger. And in January 2010, Steve Jobs walked on stage once again. He was thin, weak, and pale, but his eyes were still on fire. He sat down in a chair and said, "iPad is our most advanced technology in a magical and revolutionary device. It's unbelievable." And then, he demonstrated it. The iPad. People laughed. Then they lined up. At first, critics mocked it. "It's just a big iPhone. There's no keyboard. It's useless. Who needs this?" But when people used it, everything changed. It was fast, beautiful, easy, light, and magical. You could read, watch, play, draw, write, and work, all with your fingers. In the first 80 days, Apple sold 3 million iPads. By the end of 2010, they sold over 15 million. Revenue from iPad crossed $9 billion in just 9 months. This was bigger than most tech companies' entire business. The iPad proved something. Apple wasn't following the world. Apple was leading it. Steve Jobs' philosophy: real artists ship. Even while fighting cancer, Steve was involved in every detail. He would sit with the design team, the packaging team, the product team, even the Apple Store layout. He once told the team, "Design is not just what it looks like. Design is how it works." We don't ship junk. People think focus means saying yes, but it really means saying no to 1,000 things. He believed in perfection, simplicity, and magic, but also in speed. He often said, "Real artists ship," which meant a great idea means nothing unless you can deliver it. This became the DNA of Apple. By mid-2011, Apple was unstoppable. iPhone sales, over 72 million per year. iPad sales, over 32 million per year. Mac sales, steadily increasing again. App Store, over 15 billion downloads. Annual revenue, $108 billion. Annual profit, $25 billion. Stock price, $390 per share. Market cap, over $350 billion. In August 2011, Apple briefly passed ExxonMobil to become the most valuable company on Earth. A company that was once 90 days from bankruptcy was now #1 in the world. By late 2010, Steve Jobs was visibly weaker. He had lost a lot of weight. His voice was quieter. He moved slowly. He had already taken 2 medical leaves in the past. In January 2011, he announced another one. This time, he didn't come back fully. Still, he appeared for one final product launch in March 2011, the iPad 2. And then, he disappeared from public view. Inside Apple, people knew. Steve was preparing for the end. He spent his last months with his wife, Lorene, his children, his close team, and in his garden, reflecting. On August 24, 2011, Steve Jobs sent a short letter to the Apple board. He wrote, "I have always said if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple's CEO, I would be the first to let you know. Unfortunately, that day has come." He resigned as CEO. The board appointed Tim Cook, a quiet, disciplined operations expert who had worked by Steve's side for years. Steve became chairman of the board. But the world knew this was goodbye. On the evening of October 5, 2011, Apple released a press statement. "We are deeply saddened to announce that Steve Jobs passed away today. He was 56 years old. People cried. Customers lit candles outside Apple stores. Facebook, Twitter, and the entire internet was filled with messages. Barack Obama said, 'Steve was among the greatest of American innovators. Bold enough to think differently, brave enough to believe he could change the world, and talented enough to do it,' Bill Gates wrote. The world rarely sees someone who has had the profound impact Steve has had, the effects of which will be felt for many generations to come. Even rivals bowed. He didn't just leave a company, he left a blueprint for excellence. He left a culture of perfection, focus, minimalism, vision over numbers, emotion over specs. Apple wasn't just about what you buy. It became about what you believe. In one of his final speeches, Steve said, "We're here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why even be here?" And he did. Part 4. Legacy Beyond Life. The man Steve trusted to carry the flame, Tim Cook, was stepping forward. Tim Cook was nothing like Steve Jobs. Where Jobs was emotional, explosive, creative, Cook was calm, reserved, strategic. People were nervous. They asked, would Tim Cook take risks? Would Apple still innovate? Would the company slowly fade away without its soul? But Tim had one thing: Steve's blueprint. Before his death, Steve Jobs had spent months preparing the company, a product roadmap for years ahead, a leadership structure, a culture built on simplicity, excellence, and focus. He told Tim, "Don't try to be me. Just be yourself. But do what's right for Apple." And Tim Cook did exactly that. Right after Steve's death, Apple launched iPhone 4S, already in the pipeline, iPad 3 with Retina display, iPhone 5, taller screen, Lightning connector, iOS 7, massive UI redesign, iPad mini, compact and affordable. In 2012, Apple earned $156 billion in annual revenue. Net profit, $41.7 billion. Market cap, $500 billion. Apple wasn't slowing down. But then, the big question came. What will Apple invent now? That answer came in 2014. In September 2014, Apple announced its first brand new product since Steve's death: the Apple Watch. It was more than a watch. It tracked your health. It showed messages. It played music. It had custom watch faces. It was deeply personal. The original idea had come from Steve's early vision of personal technology, but it was Tim Cook's team that brought it to life. In 2015, the Apple Watch launched. Critics were skeptical, but by 2020, it had become the #1 best-selling watch in the world, beating even Rolex and Casio. A computer company now made the world's most popular timepiece. In 2016, Apple removed the headphone jack from the iPhone 7. People were furious. Where will I plug in my headphones? This is greedy. This is arrogant. But Apple had a plan. AirPods, wireless, tiny, simple, with no buttons, just intelligent sensing and seamless connection. At first, people mocked them. You look like toothbrushes in your ears. You'll lose them. Then people tried them, and the world changed. AirPods became a cultural symbol of coolness, simplicity, and status. In 2022, Apple made over $15 billion from AirPods alone. That's more than the entire annual revenue of Spotify. Since 2006, Apple computers had used Intel processors, but Apple was tired of depending on another company. In 2020, Apple announced it would make its own chips, starting with the M1 chip. This was a huge risk. What if performance dropped? What if software broke? What if users didn't adopt? But the M1 MacBooks were a triumph. Faster than any other laptop. Longer battery life. Cooler and quieter. Seamless app performance. Critics said, "This is the biggest jump in computer performance in over a decade." Apple proved, again, that it could reinvent its own products without Steve. Let's look at the unbelievable growth after Steve Jobs. Year revenue, USD. Net profit, USD. Market cap, USD. 2011, 108 billion, 25 billion, 350 billion. 2015, 233 billion, 53 billion, 700 billion. 2018, 265 billion, 59 billion, 1 trillion. 2020, 274 billion, 57 billion, 2 trillion. 2022 dollars, $394 billion, $99.8 billion, $2.9 trillion. 2023, $383 billion, $97 billion, over $3 trillion. In 2023, Apple became the first company in human history to cross $3 trillion in market value. That means Apple was worth more than Tesla plus Amazon plus Facebook plus Netflix plus Coca-Cola plus McDonald's plus Nike combined. And it started in a garage. Today, Apple is not just a brand. It's a global lifestyle. People wake up and check their iPhone, track their health with their Apple Watch, listen to music with their AirPods, work and create on their MacBook. Watch shows on Apple TV plus pay with Apple Pay. Back up everything to iCloud. Apple is now a part of your home, your body, your mind, and your wallet. Tim Cook doesn't shout. He doesn't seek attention. He doesn't do dramatic speeches. But what he did was transform Apple from a product company into an empire. Under Tim Cook, Apple became more global, more inclusive, more environmentally focused, and more financially powerful than ever. He proved that discipline and vision can exist together. Even though he didn't invent the iPhone, he scaled it to reach every corner of Earth. Let's remember what makes this story the greatest of all time. Started in a garage. Almost went bankrupt. Founder was fired, made a comeback. Invented products that changed the world, lost its visionary. Still rose to become the most valuable company on Earth. No company in modern history has ever combined technology, design, emotion, branding, storytelling, simplicity, as perfectly as Apple. Steve Jobs is gone, but walk into any Apple store. Hold any iPhone. Listen to the startup chime of a MacBook, and you'll feel him. He's there, in the curves, the colors, the silence, the power, the simplicity. He once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." He believed it. He proved it. and he left behind a company that will inspire generations forever. This was the complete, detailed, emotional, and powerful four-part story of Apple Inc., from garage to $3 trillion, from rebellion to revolution, from Steve Jobs to the world. 8 powerful lessons from Apple. 1. Simplicity wins in a complicated world. Apple's greatest weapon is not complexity, it's simplicity. One button, one color, one clean page. From the iPhone to the Apple Watch to their website, Apple teaches us, people don't want more features. They want less confusion. Lesson: make your work, message, and life simpler. And people will understand, remember, and love you more. 2. Consistency builds trust. Apple releases a new iPhone every year, a new iOS, new updates, on time, polished, familiar. They never disappear. They never stop showing up. Lesson: if you want to build a strong brand or a strong life, show up consistently, over and over again. Let people trust you. 3. Emotion is more powerful than features. Apple never says, we have 4 gigabytes RAM. We use 16 core chips. They say, it just works. Think different. 1,000 songs in your pocket. Lesson: whether you're building a business or telling your story, speak to emotion, not specs. People remember how you make them feel, not what you say. 4. Never be afraid to kill your own products. Apple killed the iPod, the headphone jack, the CD drive, Intel chips. Even if something worked yesterday, Apple asks, is this still good enough for tomorrow? Lesson: don't hold on to what's safe. If you want to grow, be brave enough to destroy the old version of yourself. 5. Don't do everything. Just do one thing perfectly. While other companies make fridges, TVs, printers, and even toasters, Apple focuses on phones, computers, headphones, watches, and they make each one beautiful, powerful, and unforgettable. Lesson: you don't have to do everything. Just do one thing, but do it so well that no one else can compete. 6. Control the entire experience. Apple controls the hardware, the software, the store, the charger, even the unboxing experience. Because of that, customers feel everything is smooth and premium. Lesson: don't just create a product. Create a total experience, from first impression to final goodbye. 7. Protect the brand at all costs. Apple never puts its logo on cheap products, never discounts heavily, never lowers quality to chase competitors. They protect the brand like it's sacred. Lesson: your name, your work, your values. They are your brand. Don't sell them for short-term gain. Protect your reputation. 8. Start small, dream big, deliver boldly. Apple started in a garage with no money. They made one computer. Then they changed the world. Lesson: you don't need to be big to begin. You just need to begin. And then never stop. Apple was never just a company. It was an idea that beauty, simplicity, and courage can change everything. It showed the world that you can start in a garage and rise to $3 trillion, that you can fall, be fired, fail, and still rise again, that you don't need to do everything, just the right thing, the best way, and that if you dare to think different, you can change the world. To every dreamer watching this, you don't need 100 ideas, just one powerful one. You don't need to be perfect. Just be brave. And you don't need permission. Just start. Because in the end, the most powerful thing Apple ever created was not the iPhone, not the Mac, not the watch. It was belief. Belief in bold ideas. Belief in beautiful design. Belief in people like you. So never stop believing. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to English Avenue. We create powerful stories to help you learn English and change your life. One video at a time. Hit the bell icon so you never miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching.